All right, welcome everybody. This is my amazing friend and sister. I guess I should say sister first.
Yes.
Jordan Madison.
Hi guys.
I have known Jordan for how many years?
Probably about 5.
It's been
About
it's got,
5 years.
When did you? How long have you been at Agape?
Since like sophomore in high school.
So how many years is that?
Like 7.
So I've
8.
Yeah.
It feels like
So
I don't know.
I've known you about since you've been at Agape because I've been there 13 years. So
Oh yeah, so probably about 7.
7 years. I've known Jordan about 7 years.
Yeah. Literally started me like building a friendship right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a really crazy time coming into Agape, and then I meet Lydia, and she's just so bubbly, and I was like, you know what? I love having conversations with her. She really gets deep.
For social media people, that's Ruth. She knows me by my first name, so forgive her. But I just noticed with several of my friends don't really have an opportunity to have an open dialogue with somebody, with a person of color, and they feel comfortable reaching out to. And Jordan and I have had some amazing
yeah.
conversations, and we've talked about the hard stuff. And so I reached out to her and just said, hey, can I get your perspective? Let me just make it very clear, Jordan is not speaking on behalf of all people of color. She is a single human being, one person, and her experiences are unique to her. Her life is unique to her. But what I wanted to just reach out to you, Jordan, because I value your experience. I value our relationship. I value our sisterhood.
Yeah.
I value our connection. And I value that we can have those deep, hard conversations. So that's why I reached out to Jordan specifically, was for her perspective. And everybody's going to have their own perspective. Everybody's going to have their own way of thinking and their own life experiences. So she's not, I really want to stress that she's not speaking on behalf of everybody. She's speaking on behalf of herself.
Yes.
So let's start off with just like a rundown of, wife, daughter, sister. Let's get kind of that little background so that we have a better understanding of where you're coming from.
Okay. I'm Jordan. I am a grad student at IWU. I did undergrad at Indiana Wesleyan, and I am now a grad student at Indiana Wesleyan. I am studying MFT, which is marriage and family counseling therapy. I have just begun to move back to Indianapolis. I was born in Indianapolis, raised in Indianapolis for a little bit, but then I moved to Noblesville, Indiana. So I was there for a majority of my life, but as I ended up, once I met my husband at our church, actually the church we met at was Agape, and so when I met my husband Sean at Agape, and then we just kind of hit it off, got married, and now I'm back in Indianapolis, kind of just living the dream at this point. So 1 year anniversary down, praying for more to come, and just kind of getting my life started. I am 23 years old, and just kind of looking forward to see what God has for me at the end of the day. And I know He's continuously, moving and shaking, especially nowadays. So I'm just kind of ready just to, figure things out for myself as an adult, coming into, a lot of newness with marriage and even with friends, and, just a lot of new things at the end of the day.
So Jordan has her unique experience. You have a brother, and your husband is, and I hate to bring this up, but let's be honest, this is a conversation about I don't even want to say race, because we've talked about the statistics of race.
Right.
That, it takes up 0.002% of your entire DNA to make your skin color. So your eye color takes up more genetic material than your skin color. So I hate to say race, but this issue of color.
Yes.
Your brother is black. So you've had to deal with, growing up with him being a black man in America, and your husband is black. So how does that affect your outlook when they leave the house, when they go out and do things, or if they get pulled over and you hear about that? Like, what does that do to you? Like, where does your head go?
See, it's so crazy just to pinpoint when or where to start from when it comes to talking about that concept or perspective. I have two older brothers and one younger brother. And anytime, ever since we moved to Noblesville, it's been like very different. Upon like actually moving there, it was our first time being surrounded by a lot of white people. Of course, we knew white people existed and we came in contact with white people, but to have a group or a city like that was just kind of filled that way, that's kind of when the first time we felt like, oh wow, we are different. It's not them who is different, but we are. So anytime that my brothers, like within society, there was always just kind of this pushback a little bit from the community. And at the time, I, being young, I didn't know it had anything to do with color. I never knew or focused on a difference or a uniqueness between anyone, because you just learn to just be friends with who you're friends with. And you don't get introduced to that until incident happens. So especially within Noblesville, is very different. Even the police were different out there. I did not start to feel kind of any pushback for myself until I probably was in high school, just from the community alone. And so when they're looked in as like in a society aspect, it's more so they might be dangerous, or if they're not smiling, they might be very upset that they're not to be trusted. And for those kind of stereotypical outlooks just from looking at a person and automatically coming up with a judgment, that was very difficult, because then you have to be put in a position to prove yourself or to create an experience that's not like what you see in the movies. And I've gotten so many comments about, do black people do this? Do black people do that? Do black people, like, have you ever got shot? Have you ever been to jail? Like, as a young adult, I've had that. And even as an adolescent, I've had that. And so when those questions came, I don't know how everybody else had ever felt about it. I wasn't like ashamed. I was caught off guard just because it's like, who asked these questions? I wouldn't think to ask you, have you ever been shot? Have you ever been to jail?
I would not think to ask you those questions.
Never. I think I was probably like maybe 13. And so there's like this 11, 12-year-old asking me these questions. And I just was kind of stuck. Like, what is that? Where do these questions come from? Mm-hmm. Is it because I'm black? And, when growing up, I remember it was so bad. Being in school, like, if you're throwing out the black card saying, oh, well, are you asking me this because I'm black? Are you saying whatever you're saying because I'm black? Are you doing or acting in any kind of mannerism that you are, using towards me that's different than the people that you surround yourself with, your peer group? Are you doing that because I'm black? So anytime, I would try to make a joke out of it to make people feel a little bit more comfortable, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make a connection. You're trying to be able to communicate with people that you either like you, just look at you, or just like you in personality, like you in color. But at the end of the day, I just kind of had to take it with a grain of salt, and all you can do is kind of influence, other people who have questions.
So you said something that instantly a question popped in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and we do actually have a couple of pre-asked questions that prompted this whole conversation, and I promised to try to get to them, but I really want this conversation to be organic and natural, because if you have a stilted, a scripted conversation, you're not going to necessarily ask the right questions or the best questions.
Right.
So you said, you felt like you had to make other people feel more comfortable with who you were. Mm-hmm. Has that like transferred throughout as you've gotten older, that you feel like you have to be the one to make somebody who doesn't look like you feel comfortable with who you are? Or do you feel like they also feel that burden to make you feel comfortable with who they are?
I would say both.
Okay.
I would say predominantly it would be me making people feel comfortable around me.
I'll hit him with a shoe.
Say it again.
I said I'll hit him with a shoe.
I mean, I don't even know where it comes from. I don't know where it comes from. I say it does happen on the other side for others to feel like they have to make me feel comfortable, but I would say that's only frequent when they feel uncomfortable to ask a question that's racially related. Okay. Or if there's some sort of reconciliation upon race that they're trying to grasp the concept of how I picture it,
Mhm.
or what that would look like talking to like someone who's different than them. But yeah, most definitely it's been me trying to make sure that, you know, whatever stereotypical issues that or stigmas or whatever that they've ever heard or seen, a lot of times it's a general aspect of, well, this happened to me from a last black person that I talked to, so I just want to make sure that, you know, this ain't that. And so I try to be cognizant of that, and I think that's not always a bad thing. I feel like you kind of do that with everybody you meet outside of race. You're making that first impression. You want people to like you. We are all created to be, you know, relational beings, and so we want it, you know, in essence, we want people to like us. But maybe sometimes, you know, being a black female, I want to make sure that whatever I do is not something that people can say, oh, that's a statistic, or oh, that's stereotypical, or, you know, whatever they can possibly come up with to say, oh, well, all black people do that. So now you're in a whole category instead of being an individual. So
That just sounds exhausting. Like that
It is.
absolutely sounds.
It is.
I'm listening, going, okay, all the things that I go through in my daily life to make other people feel comfortable around me, and then you've just added another layer to it, and I'm already exhausted the way I live. You are a very strong, amazing woman to do that and still have so much love and compassion and joy in your heart. Like, I
Aw,
just,
thank you.
I adore you so much, and it's an honor knowing you, really. I feel like I'm gonna cry on
Don't
camera.
cry.
So let's jump into one of the questions that and I did not blindsiding her. I gave her the questions before we turned on the camera.
She let me know.
The first one, the one about the media's role in sensationalizing certain things, or, you know, hyping up or inciting certain behaviors. Like, do you feel like there is a role that's played, or do you feel like the media is just capturing that role, or how do you view that? You saw the question, so
I like thinking about the answer to this question. I guess from my point of view would be the role that the media plays can be very skewed, and not to say that they're absolutely wrong or absolutely right. The reason why I say that is because, you know, the media is like a third party. They're getting the news of people who were not there in the moment. They're getting hearsay. There's a lot of hearsay that goes back and forth. You also have news blogs, media, like television shows, and you know, the news that actually pops up on TV. And some of these, you know, networks that are used, some of them are actually used to make something more exaggerated than it actually is.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's very difficult to kind of trust whatever, you know, news outlet that you're looking at, because sometimes when that exaggeration comes, then you have, like we were talking about a little bit before, a narrative that completely gets turned over, you know. And now, in a world of crazy advanced technology, you have so many people that are in the midst of whatever, you know, conflict that they're in or altercation, and they're live streaming this. Like, you can't deny what's going on now, because I myself, the person who is in the midst of, when no one else is around, when no one else is in my car, when no neighbors are even on site to see or to be an eyewitness, can't even trust eyewitnesses nowadays.
Right.
Because, you know, there's so many variables that go along with eyewitness testing and testifying, and now, like, and I've learned that kind of a little bit in school, that they don't really, within law enforcement, they don't trust that as much. They may take bits and pieces, but they don't, like, leave eyewitnessing to be the first thing that they say, okay, they're absolutely right, because they were at the scene. So yes, in essence, I feel like the media, it can play a role in kind of sharing what's going on, but a lot of times, you know, details can just be, you know, distorted and kind of jacked up. And so for the people that are just listening, sometimes, and as people, we kind of go less for the facts and more for the experience and the emotional, you know, pull that is being depicted in these narratives. So when you're getting the perspective from from one news site and then going to another, like, it can be kind of jumbled up in your mind, and then boom, there's an automatic, I believe this happened, and so therefore it did,
Yeah.
and so then that's another interpretation of what actually happened. So I can't say that they don't play an important role. I believe they do. It's just very hard to kind of trust nowadays, because everything on the news is just so melancholy. It's so sad. And it's not that we shouldn't be aware of these things, but I don't remember the news back in the day being just full of things that were like happening that were so horrible and so destructive, so just like before it was about people, making a difference in the world. Now it's complete, like, news, anything is just mainly they want to get stuff out that's wrong.
Tragedy sells.
Yes.
Tragedy sells.
So,
and I can't disagree with you on that. I just can't. I studied journalism for 6 years before I dropped out of college. Mm-hmm. You are way more educated than I am as far as.
Oh my gosh!
I read a lot, though. I read a lot. I self-educate constantly because I think that that's important. But I did 6 years of journalism before I left college to do something else. And even while I was in school in college in the early 2000s, I was watching the shift go from pure reporting to opinion based. Like, it became, instead of
we want ratings, so let's flip it in a way that can get more people involved.
And there was always there's always been like an opinion column or an opinion section.
Yeah.
But that's gone from being like one column or one section to 90% of what's being reported. Mm-hmm. Instead of just saying X, Y, and Z happened on such and such a date, they're saying, well, what do you feel is going on? Or how do you feel about this? Or what do you think? It's like the facts are being lost in the shuffle. Mm-hmm. And that leads into the second question that we had about how the narrative, like, how do people present the facts of a case when they come out, when a narrative of emotion is being so predominantly pushed. Like, we talked about specifically the Mike Brown incident in Ferguson. I had friends who were actually on the ground in Ferguson and were there firsthand, and had the coroner's report before it went to the news and everything, and that what happened was justified because the cop was actually being beat up and almost killed. Right. And the loss of life is horrific to me. Right. So I don't say lightly when I say it was justified, or that it was that it was a good shoot, as they would call it, because it was a loss of life, and that's tragic. But the narrative hands up, don't shoot never happened, and yet that several years later is being still used and pushed. So, how does that, like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do people who want to present the facts, how should they go about doing that? And when in the course of something like this, should they start doing that? Because a lot of times it is, let's be honest, white people who have law enforcement families that are saying, wait, or I'm not going to jump and start saying Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, or they'll whatever they're saying, they're coming from a point of pain too, but they also want to push truth when it comes out, if something different happened than what's being said. How would you best receive that kind of information in the midst of something so volatile and controversial?
So, and even this is a gray area too. I feel like, it's easy for one to say, if only I could just get the truth out there, people will see it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I can't really speak on when would be the best time to do that, just because you have people, like we were talking about before, who are so emotionally involved. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's hard for people who are emotionally involved to see a different light, and the aspect of it being, well, the person was actually wrong. And even though those are the facts, the people themselves, you have families, you have friends, of family friends that, you know, have a connection with the person whose life was lost, but you can't really look at the facts at that point because so many people are emotionally involved. And on top of that, like even during, you know, those cases, there's like a huge list. That's what I think I've seen most of the time. There is a huge list of names of so many people who've gone missing, who have died, and at that point people are having a hard time connecting with the facts because of this constant, you know, addition of names of different people. And I'm not saying that the facts don't matter. I truly stand for truth. I stand for a specific standard that should be kept. But as far as the matter of deciding when someone should, you know, kind of invest in bringing to light facts, I can't really say when. Because at the same time, you're going to get pushback either way.
Right. Right.
Because I really do feel like so many people are in their emotions, and if they especially are tied to these emotions, and then they're already having, you know, this thought about the law enforcement officers, like there's already a stigma with them. And so it's hard again to push past what has already been created in that mindset. And so I don't know. I wish that we could look at it from an outside perspective and then to hone in on some things, to really grasp what really happened. But a lot of times it's just so hard because so many people are just seeing it at face value. They're not looking around in all the nooks and crannies of what other possibilities could have occurred since you yourself weren't there. Or, you know, because you're the family member, you're so affected by this loss. There's no way I can look at you, hear what you have to say, and agree. And not even to say that anyone has to agree, but I don't think you'll be able to keep that conversation going because that person is already hurt from a loss. They're already bereaved. They are feeling hopeless. They're feeling helpless because of what's going on with law enforcement. And at that point, even if an officer of faith came to you and tried to relay truth, it's still hard. It's still difficult.
Would there be a better way to present the information instead of just saying, well, here are the facts? Is there a better way? Like, I can think in my head there might be a better way, but again, like, my perspective isn't your perspective. Like, I could sit here and go, you know what, my Facebook posts have been very much God-centered because for me, my faith is number one. Like, this world is going nowhere without Jesus, except to hell. And let's be honest. And so and you've probably seen all of my posts saying it doesn't cost extra to be kind. That is my life motto. Because kindness wins out. Like, kindness doesn't cost my soul anything. Kindness doesn't do what anger and hatred and animosity and rage and fear do. Like, kindness doesn't create a deficit in my soul. And so that's what I'm always pushing. And so even with all of these, like with the protests and the riots and the looting and the constant just barrage of fear and pain and loss, like, that's what I want to push. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if the facts come out, or when the facts come out, if I'm sitting here going, you know what, absolutely, Black Lives Matter, and what's happening is atrocious, and you know what, there are far too many killings, and there are far too many people who get away with doing bad things, and then I present the facts with that angle, does that make it better, or is it still just there's too many emotions going on?
In my opinion, I do feel like there's just too many emotions going on. And again, I am all about the facts. I'm all about, standing on truth and what actually was. I wouldn't say to withhold that information.
Okay.
But I can't speak to when it would be appropriate for, information to come. And even if, I kind of look at it in the analogy of talking with somebody who you're trying to calm them down. Say whatever is going on with this other person has nothing to do with you. You didn't cause them to be angry, you didn't cause them to be upset, but you're witnessing that they are, and you know a little bit of, you know, the history behind, you know, the conflict or inner turmoil that they're experiencing, and you're trying to talk them down in the midst of them being upset. That's how I look at it. So it's not that it shouldn't be said, and I can't say it's all about timing, which I feel like in that aspect it would be.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's such a touchy subject that you really have to be able to feel around for when that time is right. Because I just kind of look at it as, you know, if someone's angry and you're right then and there, and you know what's going on, and you know, hey, if I could just get this out, maybe, just maybe, it could change, you know, their thought process, it could change, you know, their demeanor, it could change something. But a lot of times when it's something very like centered, rooted, deep, it's not gonna change very much. And so you just kind of have to feel around for that. And I truly, and please do not get me wrong, I do believe things should be said. I believe facts should be laid out there. But there's just a time and a place and an angle that you have to kind of go about that for it to be appropriate.
Presentation is everything. Like, I can sit there and yell at you, I love you, and then I could just go, Jordan, you know what? I love you. You are my sister, and you are amazing, and I love you. And there's two different ways of doing it.
The approach is everything.
It is.
Yeah.
Or I could be like, you're beautiful. Or I could be like, you're beautiful. And it's two different. It's two different ways.
You can feel it in two different ways. Yeah.
So I get that. Do you now? I know I am going to ambush you a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you? sorry. I told you I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that, but I'm going to anyway. Do you have questions for white people, or do you know of people who have questions for white people that they just never ask, or that they just assume because this conversation, a lot of times, if you don't have a good relationship with people who aren't like you and who didn't grow up, you don't have that access.
Yeah.
Do you have questions for white people that you want to ask?
I have one, and this is what I tried to, ask a supervisor of mine, which he didn't have too much to say about it, which not that you have to have this big, convoluted explanation about it, but just, I wonder the thought process and the minds of my brothers and sisters in Christ. The mindset of white people. How do I frame this?
Be honest. just say it, because we're not going to offend each other.
Yeah, no.
Genuine,
I don't know how to articulate it.
Okay.
A little bit. I know there's always conversations about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, pro-black, anti-black, or whatever. What is the meaning behind all lives matter? Is it, because I know it can be personal and I know it can be a collective thought too, but I guess what is the meaning upon that in relation to, or in comparison or contrast to, Black Lives Matter?
Okay. So, and before we hit record on camera, we actually talked about being able to see both sides of things, and being able to go, okay, well, I see your side, well, I see your side, and having that dual perspective. So I will say, for me, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to be honest with you guys. The very first time I heard Black Lives Matter, I stopped and I said, what does that mean? What's the context?
Yeah.
And should I be for this?
Mm-hmm.
Because so many times you have what sounds like a good idea, and the people pushing it are actually part of the problem.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dig first. I'm like, okay, before I jump on a bandwagon, let me dig first, because I'm a very inquisitive person.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the organizations that were pushing it really, really hard were actually part of the problem. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But then my concern was, and the concern I was hearing from other people was, well, if certain organizations and certain groups are pushing this narrative, then the next step would be white lives don't matter. And I think, and I'm like, I got past that.
Right.
I got past that pretty fast. But of course, I go to Agape. I've been the minority at Agape for 13 years.
Yeah.
I lived in Detroit for several years before that.
Yeah.
So, I was with a black man for many years. It's like, so for me, I've been so inside like a culture and a way of life that doesn't look like me. I got over myself really fast. I'm like, all right, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, but what I from what I've gathered from other people is the concern is that the next step isn't all lives matter, but that white lives don't matter, and that what's happened to black people or to people of color. I don't know if I'm saying black people. That just sounds so.
Trust me, we love black.
Okay, no, I love it. I mean, the way it's almost termed like a dirty word, and I'm just like, that really bothers me because I'm like, all right, color is beautiful, period.
Yeah.
Like, color is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Have you seen the people in other countries?
Hello?
Like, stunning. But just that what has happened to people of color would happen to them even though they're not the problem. So that's what I've seen as the pushback has been, is that they don't want that pendulum to swing too far over to where we've now got a different set of racism going on. And I think for several, and I know honestly that's not 100% of the people. A lot of people are saying all lives matter to negate the whole concept behind Black Lives Matter, and they're trying to stop any kind of furthering of equality and of removing racism and prejudice. There are a lot of people who are saying all lives matter who don't care about Black lives. I will fully agree with that. From what I've seen, the all lives matter is a fear pushback or concern pushback of wait a minute. My goal, like someone else saying, my goal is that all lives do matter, not just Black lives. And again, like we're talking about, like timing. This is not, like, I get it. All lives matter. All lives are precious in the eyes of God. But right now the issue is there's a really large number of Black lives that are being lost. There's a lot of white lives that are being lost too. Yes, I agree. I see that. But right now what's being brought to light is that there's an issue that we need to address, and we can't negate that. You know, that's like, you know, you have a bunch of kids. Like, well, I grew up with 6 brothers and sisters, and gosh, we've had so many injuries and illnesses in my family, it's ridiculous. But that would be like, you know, something happening, my dad having an asthma attack that takes him to the emergency room because his asthma could be fatal. That would be like, you know, everybody's doing their thing, and, you know, we have our squabbles and we have our issues and we have our problems with each other, and, you know, one sister isn't getting along with one brother and we're fighting and stuff, but overall we do actually love each other. My dad has an asthma attack and he's being rushed to the hospital and he has to be intubated and he's in ICU, and we're like, Dad's life matters, and one of the siblings going, all of our lives matter. It's the same concept. Yes, all of our lives matter, but right now the person on life support, his life matters. His is the one that matters because he's the one in crisis. So
I agree.
I get the concept of all lives matter. I just don't think this is the time and place for it, because saying Black Lives Matter doesn't mean Hispanic lives don't matter, or Asian lives don't matter, or Indigenous lives don't matter, or white lives don't matter, or they're not saying that. What you're saying is, we're on life support right now. We need to stop, and get us off life support and get us breathing on our own first. Let's get us out of the hospital before we start focusing on everybody else's life. And like, I get that. I grasp that concept, and I'm like, all right, I got this. I just need other people to get this. But I will say, and this just because it even hurts me to just watch the divisiveness. When there's pushback to all lives matter, like we've talked about, context matter, how you say it matters, instead of educating or pulling someone aside and saying, hey, you know, this is the reality behind it. A lot of times I've seen, and not just from people of color, but also from lot of white people do it too. They go straight for the anger and straight for the hatred and accuse that person of being racist without connecting with them and using that as a teachable moment. Mm-hmm. And that anger and that hatred and that maybe it's not even hatred, it's just anger and frustration and hurt, mm-hmm. and lashing out that way, but it ends up creating a bigger divide. And now, instead of having to overcome this chasm, we're having to overcome this chasm. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
to just get back to what we're primarily trying to
get to. Can we have those conversations? Can we, instead of automatically assuming somebody is a racist or or prejudiced or hateful or spiteful, can we just say, hey, where are you coming from?
Yeah.
I see you're saying this, and while in a normal context I agree with you, what's the point of the context now? Like, where are you coming from?
And I like that you say that, because that brought something to my remembrance, that like the same angle that is, like when things are being taken out of context, and instead of people being proactive and kind of thinking through things and not just associating them with just one concept, and asking like, hey, kind of what are your feelings, what are you feeling in this moment, like when you say that, or how do you mean such and such. That brings me back to like just kind of being in undergrad. A lot of times when any type of racial subject that was depicted in class, there was always just kind of this pressure for mainly Black people, because Indiana Wesleyan has tried to skyrocket in their development of diversity, mm-hmm. Whether that has succeeded or failed, maybe failed, but
they've got a long way to go.
They have a very long way to go.
I just remember being in class, and the same concept that we're kind of talking about is flipped on the other side, where as a Black person, trying to just talk, just say what's on their mind, give a little bit of their own, 2 cents within whatever subject it was. It didn't even have to just be race, but a lot of times when it did come down to race, like I was saying, there was that pressure. Mm-hmm. But what made me think of it was when there were several times, I remember one time in particular, like I knew that if I said something, people would only understand the context in the fact that I'm Black. But I didn't mean it in the context of, well, I'm saying this because I'm Black. I'm saying it in the context as a general thought. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of another thing. I was never asked, well, are you coming from a Black perspective, or are you coming from a general, like, wholesome perspective? But I knew that if I spoke up on whatever particular topic it was, it didn't matter what it was, I would be coming from a Black perspective instead of just a human being, just normal human nature conversation or whatever. So I think that's so awesome, like to think outside of the box like that, to say, okay, instead of me just being reactive to whatever's going on and whatever people say, let me first get an understanding. Mm-hmm. And then when I have received that understanding, or need to dove in a little bit deeper to whatever's being said, then we can have a conversation. Mm-hmm. But there's always that automatic reaction, mm-hmm. or that automatic judgment that already places you in a category. Mm-hmm. So you really then have to be careful with your words. You really then have to put on a persona that is acceptable in society, because you're not seen as an individual who is learning as everyone else. That you are seen exactly how I see you. So you must be coming from a white perspective because you're white. I can't see you just saying whatever you say, racial issues or not. Mm-hmm. I can't see you just saying what you're saying in the perspective that you say it, in the context that you say it, in the mannerisms that you're pulling off at the same time. Mm-hmm. And even knowing your personality without seeing you're coming from a white perspective. You're not just coming from a human perspective. It has to specifically be white. And so for us to be in that box, everybody, not just Black people, it's everybody. Box. It's horrible. You can't be relational. You can't step out of constantly living in fear and walking on eggshells. And right now we're in a society where, we are so prevalent of offending people, and we're trying to get out of that perspective. And the thing is, maybe the thing is we really need to be offending people, like not in an aspect of intentionality, but in a sense where you're able to develop conversations that need to happen.
That you have the room to be human and make the errors and then be gently and lovingly and humanely corrected. Yes.
Agreed.
The only way we're
I
going to
agree.
learn is if we make the mistake and someone's like, hey, you know what? Maybe let's do it this way.
Yeah.
Or where were you coming from?
But
or
we're reactive, so it's hard for people
Right.
to kind of automatically, like, I know we would think of that,
Yeah.
you know, and not just completely go off the rail and be like, I cannot believe she said that, or I can't believe she did that, or da-da-da-da-da. No, ask them. Ask questions. I tell people all the time, if I'm asking you, like, say a scenario has happened, whatever happened, and I'm coming to you and I'm asking follow-up questions, the main one that's asked is, well, why?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. So you mean, despite everything that happened, that's the one question you don't know how to answer? Because none of us nowadays, we don't ask why. We just kind of go with whatever happens.
Or we jump on somebody.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
never stop to ask and think and pull yourself out of your own perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's one, like, we have such a benefit with Agape. We
Yeah,
really
yeah.
do. Because what does the bishop always says? With all thy getting, get an understanding. And we talk about shut mouth grace.
Uh-huh.
And we talk about, about forgiveness. And we talk about love. And we talk about grace and mercy. I mean, like, Agape has really
He
spoiled us.
calls you out too. He's
Oh.
like, oh, I know y'all getting quiet when I'm touching nerves.
He does. But we're being trained
Yeah.
and taught how to not be reactive, but to get an understanding.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of spoiled for that. So I
Yeah.
realize our perspective is going to be a little different than the
For us,
majority.
it's kind of common sense.
Right.
For others, they may need a little bit more work.
Right. So Agape is at 6240 North Georgetown Road in Indianapolis.
Come and visit. Come and visit. We up and running.
Yes. Yes, and we do, right now because of COVID,
Yeah.
wear your mask.
Come on.
But come on.
Come
Sunday
on.
school starts at 10, service at 11 on Sundays.
Look,
Tuesday Bible class.
appetizing.
Tuesday Bible class at 7 p.m.
There we go.
But honestly, like that's really our advantage. Like that's our biggest advantage, and I think that's one of the reasons why we can have this conversation.
Right.
Is because we have such amazing foundational teaching. Because because our faith is so solid, and it's rooted in truth. It's rooted in reality. It's rooted in God. It's so we can sit down and have this conversation, and I so wish more people could have that conversation with other
Or
people
feel
that
uncomfortable enough to.
yeah, like it's okay to feel uncomfortable. I told you.
Yes.
What did I tell you? It was like I was so anxious and nervous coming here today. I was really excited when I asked the question, "Hey, Jordan, let's have this conversation." And she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then as the days went by, I started getting more and more anxious because I started saying more and more people get in their anger and their frustration and their hurt is just spilling out of them. And then I started thinking, well, what if Jordan won't be real with me? What if she'll hold back on me? What if she's always held back on me because we don't look alike? And that anxiety kicked in, and now I've got sweat running down my back because I was so scared and so uncomfortable because I didn't want you to be uncomfortable, because I didn't want you to feel like you had to hold back with me. But I still pushed through and wanted to have that conversation because I think it's important.
Right. And I think that's the thought. That's the process of that should take place at all times. There's nothing wrong with being outside your comfort zone, because I truly believe that bestows growth.
Yes.
Like, once you're able to kind of push back, and then from that uncomfortable awareness, and then you're finally in the midst of whatever that is that's uncomfortable, sooner or later you'll find yourself getting a little bit more comfortable, and then you're getting your needs met. Where in my class we're always talking about attachment needs. We fiend for that secure attachment to other people, and we can't do that if we're always feeling comfortable, especially when it's people that don't look like us or don't have the same background as we do. It doesn't always have to associate, and this is what another thing that I was telling her, that we don't have to look the same to have the same background.
Right.
I feel like I have a completely different background than most of my black friends, to be honest. And it's funny because they feel like that they see more blackness in me than other black people, and I would challenge that, because I was a suburban baby, you know. There are things that have happened that people can say, oh, you lived a black life. Like, honestly, really, what is living a black life? Everybody has their struggles. Everybody, you know, overcomes, you know, trials, tribulations. Everybody has something in their story that can truly inspire somebody else, regardless of the cultural, ethnic background that you have. And we don't want to be secluded to just one box. And I feel like that's, as a collective, you know, it's great to see that when you have other people who are, you know, strengthening you, encouraging you, supporting you within that own community. But that doesn't mean you stay secluded just into that little bubble.
Right.
You make those connections with outside people so you can have a better understanding and have a wholesome understanding of how to communicate with people who aren't like you. You know, and so I don't think that's bad. I never thought that was bad. And sometimes you feel, I will admit, in undergrad, there were times I felt really uncomfortable to hang out with my white friends, walking down the, you know, mallway, seeing a group of black people standing there watching me hang out with white people. And I come from a very double conscious mind. Like, in my upbringing, I was always kind of like too white for the black people, too black for the white people, because in my upbringing, it was a good thing to have both of those connections. You can be yourself with one community, you can still be yourself in another community, but at the end of the day, to me, it's all about being able to communicate. If I'm using terminology or acting a different way that may seem uncomfortable, or, you know, it doesn't make sense to whoever I'm talking to, that's just outside of that kind of, you know, collective realm, I guess you could say, then how am I communicating with the person next to me? Let me be able to adapt and, you know, socialize in that way so I can make those connections. The point is making connections. It's not trying to change who you are to fit the mold. It's trying to be able to adapt so you can bring some, and then it poses questions. Then questions can be asked. There's comfortability that's made. There's rapport that's made. Then you can build. And I feel like people kind of miss sight of that now, because we are progressively becoming more divided than we are united. I feel like a lot right now, people feel like there is such a great divide that there is no middleman. There is no gapping a bridge. There is no filling in anything, because there's so much that's going on. And I completely disagree. I disagree that we have come so far as a nation that can't be done. Yes, granted, we do still have people who live under a rock who might not know what's kind of going on, or don't understand, and sometimes that's not even their fault, you know. People really don't understand that a lot of this stuff starts at home. Right. A lot of this stuff starts with grandparents, great grandparents, even, you know, parents within this generation. Like, it starts at home, however you're being brought up. But that does not mean you're secluded to just that one thought. That's just like, you know, you're doing one thing as a child, you're growing up, and maybe the things you did as a child you're not so much interested in, because you found something so new that you can grasp on. And that's kind of how I look at it. Like, I may have done something 1 minute, but that doesn't mean my perspective can't change. And there's nothing wrong. As long as you have a standard, as long as you have a foundation about yourself. I feel like the concept of, you know, what is it? It's that thing people, I used to see it all the time. Like, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, you can still have your, I feel like it's great to have two heads better than one. That's what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's great when we're able to unite and bounce ideas off of each other and come to like crazy cool understandings. But then when you feel like you can only have one thought, that puts you in a box. You're not supposed to be in the box. You're supposed to be outside. And that box is comfortable because it's something familiar. Mm-hmm. It's something that you can adjust to on your own. You don't need anyone to convince you. You don't need an influencer. You can do that on your own. But when you're able to step out of that box and to be able to face things head on, even in the comfortability, it is so worth it. It's worth it to have these conversations.
It is.
It's worth it to, be introduced to cultures and people you have never seen, never understood, have only seen on TV. Please, people, I'm begging you, get out of your minds, get out of yourselves, get out of your own perspective, because the more and more you are so comfortable in that, and not that being comfortable is bad, but only allowing yourself to be comfortable in that aspect, that can be dangerous, and especially now.
It's the us for and no more mindset that's killing us, or that's been something I learned when I was a phrase I learned when I was younger was that us for and no more was like, I can have these 3 friends and me, or these 3 people in my life and me, and anybody outside our box is bad and wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that, because I've said for years that what makes me a strong, better person is that my friends aren't like me. Like, we are so different.
Yeah.
Our education is different. Our background is different. Our upbringing is different. Our travel, where we travel and if we travel is different. I have one friend who, she hates to leave her home. Like, she's happy in her town, and she hates to travel. The only time she's traveled since I've known her in the last 7 years was, I think, 3 times, and that was to visit me. That was to come see me.
But that's good. That's a step.
But I usually travel to her, and even when I travel to her, I get her outside of her city, because I'm like, oh, let's do this, and she'll be, okay, we can go do this, and I drag her out of her comfort zone, but she also drags me out of mine, because in order for her to have a good time, we have to have quiet time.
Right.
And so I've learned the joy and the necessity of quiet, recharging. And that's made me a better person. I have a friend who's a nurse, and her education, and she has 3 kids and a husband, and I'm single, and I'm a college dropout. She makes me a better person.
Yeah.
You make me a better person. Your thoughts, your perspective, your beauty in just who you are as a human being, your enthusiasm for learning, and your faith walk, and just your amazingness, like, that makes me a better person. Like, our pastor and his strength in everything he's gone through, and his ability to still get up and preach and teach and love and have compassion and not stray from truth despite everything he's faced, makes me a better person. Like, that diversity makes me better. Like, why would I hide from that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to be a better person.
And when you look at it, it truly is a beautiful thing. When you look at it like that, like how we can be so, like, redefined, reconstructed by, our developments of relationships with different people, same, different, doesn't matter. Like, I love that those things are interconnected. Relationships are always going to be interconnected, whether we like it or not, it's just how we were made.
Yeah.
It's how we were made.
Do you have any questions for me? Before I end this, because I think we've had a really good conversation. I love talking with you. But do you have any questions for me?
I guess I want to know your perspective, because I haven't asked anyone really, kind of your perspective on what's going on now and what you hope for the future. Like, how you're feeling in this moment of what's going on right now, but then also on the lighter part of that, what do you hope for the future?
So my thoughts about what's going on right now are just, they've been hard. Like, I've been walking around heartbroken. I live on the near east side of Indianapolis. I live in the city. Some of the rioting gets so loud I can hear it from my windows.
Yeah.
Sunday night there were 16 gunshots on my street, and then the following night 2 women got into a brawl in the middle of the night. So it's very close to home right now. I have one sister who is texting me daily, making sure I'm safe.
Well, that's wonderful.
It is. My parents wanted me to pack a bag and spend time out in the suburbs because, and I'm like, but my home and my landlord are all in the same building, so I'm going to stay home. So it's very nerve-wracking. It's very hard to see so much divisiveness, however you want to say it, people. I know someone's going to correct me. Between so many people I love. Like, I'm sitting here going, I don't even know how to speak because it's so hurtful to watch all of it. Black Lives Matter. My life matters. Your life matters. But right now, the people on life support matter more.
Right.
And when they're off life support, everybody can matter equally again.
Yeah.
But I'm not. Sometimes I just feel really tongue-tied, and you know me. I usually know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
I've felt so tongue-tied and at a loss for the right words to express how devastated I am by all of this. But I also feel really hated. Like, I don't. It's rare that this affects me in a way where it starts to internalize, because I see the reactionariness of everybody, and I get that it's a knee-jerk reaction. It comes from a place of pain and hurt, and so I can sit there and go, okay, I'm just going to pray about it, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to love them. We're the church that loves you to life. I'm going to love them to life. I'm going to love them through this. And right now I feel so hated. Like, I personally feel like people hate me because I don't walk lockstep in agreement with whatever they're saying. And I feel
Is that like hate it as in an individualistic perspective or a collective perspective?
both.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever been more hyper aware of my own skin color than when, I think the only other day I felt that was the first day I moved onto my street just off of 8 Mile in Detroit. Yes, I lived off of 8 Mile in Detroit. And as I walked down the street, I was the only white person on the street, and you could hear the deadbolts locking as I walked past houses.
Wow.
And I became acutely aware of my whiteness. And right now I feel acutely aware of how pale I am. And I know there will be people that'll say, well, good, now you know how I feel. But my reaction to that would be, why would you want me to feel the same hurt and pain you feel? Because what I would want is, I would want someone to never have to feel that. My goal would be to do what it took to make sure somebody else didn't have to go through that. So I don't understand well, good, now you know how I feel. I feel awful that you feel that way. That what can I do to make this better so that other people don't have to feel this way? To me, it should be the same response as a parent would have, where, whatever that parent went through, they would want to make sure their children had a better life.
Right.
That's to me how that's how the perspective should be.
I see that.
And that's just not that's not what's going on. It's, oh, good, now you know how I feel. Well, good, now you've lived a day in my life. And I've actually had someone tell me that when we talked about that, when I moved into Detroit, and I had that experience. Well, good, now you have an idea, but you don't know the rest of my life.
Right.
I spent 12 years of my life going to a prison to watch a man who fathered me sit in a prison uniform for murder. Like,
right.
that was my life. That's my human experience. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Like, that's a terrible way to grow up.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a terrible way to have to live your life. Like, but I know I can take that perspective and go, if I feel that way for a few days, how can I live my life to help other people not feel that way? I mean, and that's how my perspective is with this.
Yeah.
And my hope would be that that's what happens with other people, where the fear that, no matter what your color is, the fear or the pain or the anguish that they're going through, they turn that around, and instead of going, I want to make other people hurt too, they say, what can I do in my everyday life to make it so other people don't feel that way around me?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't cost extra to be kind. It just doesn't. It actually adds to us. It adds to our humanity. It adds to our human experience. It adds to our ability to connect with other people, to be kind. It doesn't mean be disingenuous,
Yeah.
but just be kind. So, right now, it hurts a lot. But I'm a person of hope. I'm a person of faith. So, I'm going to continue to live my life in kindness. I'm going to continue to walk before God. I'm going to continue to have the hard conversations. I'm going to continue to love people to life and really hope that my one little ripple helps other people with their ripples to be better.
Yeah. I agree.
What about you? I'm going to flip the question on you. How are you
Honestly,
feeling in all this, and what do you hope for?
I really don't know how I feel. I had recently just made a Snapchat story, just kind of like trying to say something, because I feel like people have been trying to get something out of me, or maybe feeling pressured that I needed to say something or stand for something. I would say in all actuality, like, I just feel kind of like what you had said earlier. Like, I understand the madness. I understand the turmoil. I understand the pain to an essence. I don't understand all of those things in their entirety.
Right.
But I will say, the way that things are being handled, there is a cause and there's an effect, but the effect of it still continues to proceed. It can get worse from here. And with the writing, I think it's completely obnoxious. I think it's ridiculous. I think it doesn't hold anything positive. And that's not to say that people haven't been driven or provoked to that. And within every right, they have that. But the action itself, I just disagree with. I feel like, whatever people say that they work hard, they work their tail off for, they're so determined to do, a lot of times we continue to persevere. And I feel like at this point we've, as a nation, have kind of lost that perseverance, that hope, that outlook for the future, because right now we're in a reactive state. And so that's the down part of it. Like, I feel bad for the families and lives that have been lost, the perspective that other people are gaining now from seeing how other people are reacting. And I just feel like we're giving yet another reason for people to bring up stereotypes, for people to give stigmas, for people to provide statistics and how people are associated with different things that transpire in just life in general, or history itself. I don't want to be another person who is for something that I don't see coming to pass that's going to be positive. I just don't. I disagree. I disagree with the action. I understand the issue behind it, but the action itself, I'm just thinking, it's where is that going to do? Where is that going to take us? That's, I think, all I can think about is the outlook of, great, now we're here, and then when we look back on this, we're going to think, dang it, I shouldn't have, I could have did this, I wish I had have, but it will be too late at that point. And that's what I'm afraid of. Like, now we're in this moment because this right now, it has to be done. I'm feeling hype, I'm furious, this, that, and the third. I'm gonna do this because of something that happened. But then the aftermath, and looking back on those experiences, and looking back on that turmoil, you're gonna be like, dang, I wish I didn't do that, or I wish we as everybody didn't take it that far, because we're not. I don't feel like we're heading to anything that's gonna provide prosperity. not where we are right now.
Yeah.
So my hope is that we do. My hope is for prosperity. My hope is for a mind that can truly be changed, and an outlook of the future can be changed for a positive, a positive understanding amongst everyone else. So that's all I can help.
I know that was supposed to be the last question, but you said something and it made me think of this. What can people do? I'll say people in general, because I know that it's not just a white people thing. What can people do to help remove that added pressure of you have to speak on behalf of all Black people?
What can they do?
Like, is there a way we can act, like people can act? I say we because I want to know if I need to correct my behavior. Like, but what can people do to
prevent the pressure of doing
or
that?
to help remove some of that pressure? Because I know it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It's going to take some time, but if we can start acting now, we can get some of that pressure off, because that's exhausting. That's that's too much. You shouldn't have to hold the weight of an entire group of people on your shoulders.
Agreed. And I will say, you have actually done it. You know, upon starting this conversation, letting me know, like, hey, I want what you have to say. I don't want what you have to say in relation to the entire Black community, or in relation to the riots that are going on. Like, putting me in a category with people who are rioting and I'm sitting at home, like,
yeah, that doesn't, to me, that wouldn't make sense.
Exactly. And I just think for the first, and this is legitimately the first time I've ever been asked, what is your perspective? My professors never asked me, what is your perspective? What is your experience? What is your background? Not Black people, professors who have done this countless times. They are, given opportunities for multicultural training, but yet still don't realize you're still doing it. Even if it's me and another Black person in the class, I'm still being told, so what's the experience in the community of Black people? How do they take on whatever the topic is? So this is actually the first time someone has told me, so what is your experience?
At 23 years old, this is the first time you've been asked for your personal...
absolute first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
so
is
I think
horrifying
that,
to me.
the second you said it, I was like, wow. Like, okay. Because of course, like, in your mind, you're just kind of, you push it off. You learn to push things off. You learn to just let things roll down your back, and you just say what is associated with you. And then you're put in the position to make your own disclaimer, because that's what I had to do. Even with other Black people that might or may not have been in class, like, I had to then set a platform for myself to say, I'm not speaking on behalf of everyone else, but I will say from my own experience, so I will say, as far as a solution, that for me, and I don't know how everybody else feels, like, for me, that was significant. Just to say, what's your experience? As you, Jordan, what's your experience?
Okay, for the record, anytime I ask you a question, I'm asking for you, Jordan, your
Yeah,
experience.
that's like, you did it. You had already done it.
Like,
and you didn't even know it.
No matter, like, no matter what our conversations are, like, private or whatever, when I ask you a question, I'm asking Jordan your personal experience. I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of everybody else.
And I appreciate
that's
that.
too much of a mantle to wear.
And it's unrealistic.
It is.
The fact that people think that, and even they would do that with, like, Korean students. So what happens in Korea when such and such and such and such? And it's like, why are you asking one person out of millions of other people that don't even have the same parents? They don't have the same lineage. They don't have the same background. They didn't even go to the same schools. Like, just think about it when you, like, and I feel like that's another thing. Like, we say things. We don't understand at the time that maybe they're a little culturally insensitive, because it just doesn't feel culturally insensitive, and that's okay. But at the same time, being able to be aware, that's what we need. We need to be aware of being culturally insensitive, because sometimes, like I said, something so simple like that, like, hey, so what's the experience like in Haiti and such and such and such? Like, off the tongue, it doesn't sound bad, but then the person speaking, they're like, okay, I'm speaking on behalf of Haiti. We do A, B, C, and D as a tradition and such and such. You know,
But
you don't think about it until it's you.
When you do that to a person, you take away from their personal culture and their personal heritage and what makes them so unique and amazing and interesting and valuable. You remove their most you take away their shininess and their jewelness and their humanity. Like you dehumanize them
But it's
that way.
worse in your own community too. Because I've had pushback from black people, of course. I would not be considered black enough if I don't eat a certain food, or if I don't talk a certain way, or if I don't pretend like I'm uneducated, if I don't do black activities.
Oh, that
I
talking
do
white
white
thing
activities.
drives me nuts.
Talking white,
like,
you know.
What's
I get pushback from that too. I get pushback from both sides. So at the end of the day, once I begin, or for anybody who's even going through that themselves, or if you're able to be or come to a point in your life where you are confident in yourself, and you know, with the life experiences that you have had that have literally developed who you are, and you're able to feel comfortable in that, be in a straight line and live that. Because doesn't matter what you do, society is going to say something. Yeah. I remember I saw this meme. It was in 4 different parts. One had, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but like I think about it all the time, because literally this is how our society is. It was like a horse or a donkey or something, and then a man and a woman. If they're walking the donkey, society has something to say about it. If the woman's riding the donkey and the man is, why is he allowing his wife on the donkey? Why is he walking? Vice versa, he's on it and she's down. Why is she carrying the donkey and he's on the man? Like, and then at the end of it, the 4 square says society will make a judgment no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, it's true.
If God is pleased, whatever
Whatever it is. If he's already saying okay, you don't need man's gratification, you don't need man go ahead, you don't need man's recognition, you don't need any of that. If he says, you know, you're good enough and I want you to continue to walk and develop and elevate in me, that's all you need. That's the only okay I need.
Right. What does Bishop always say? I gotta hear well done. I gotta hear well done.
That's literally the goal at the end of the day. Do you care about what other people say about you? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
And you want people to like you, but is it something that's the hill to die on every single failed relationship? No. Because that's maybe the process of God moving people out of your life who are not in the same, on track like you, where he wants you to be. He's moving them to a different track that he wants them to be on. And there's losing relationships like that sometimes aren't that, as worse as we make it out to be, because we're living in that present. And again, we're reacting to whatever's going on. So I just encourage y'all. I encourage y'all to get out of, to reach for other perspectives, to be open, not to say that you have to agree with every little thing that comes along, but just to really be solidified in knowing like, hey, let's develop a conversation. Let's take out the elephant in the room and let's try to discuss, issues or even topics that are of interest, things that you have questions about. I don't think it's wrong when we go to different, countries and they're asking, oh my gosh, I love your accent. Can you say something, da da da? Or, oh my gosh, I love your hair. And, oh, you are so beautiful. What are the traditions? Like, we don't get upset when we're asking those questions going into another territory.
Right.
But we do when it's our own territory and our own people. That's just so weird.
Yeah.
It's like the concept doesn't even make sense. It's like oxymoron.
Let's celebrate our diversity. Let's celebrate it.
It's not something to shame.
Right.
It's not something to be afraid of.
Embrace it.
Yeah. I agree.
Jordan, I thank you so much for being on board with this and for giving me your perspective. That's yes.
My first time. As from my perspective.
I love you so much.
Yes, I love you too.
So thank you so much for doing this and for agreeing to do this. I hope we can have more conversations as things go on. I would think it would be fun to make this a random, occasional thing to do.
Oh yeah, totally.
Just because I love hearing a perspective that's not necessarily my own. Mm-hmm. I think we agreed on a lot of things, but there are just things that I don't know about.
Right.
And that you don't know about, and that we can talk it out. Like,
Mhm.
have that conversation.
Yeah. I
Be
agree.
nervous.
Be nervous. Oh my gosh, what is he gonna say? Yes, I believe it's great.
So, thank you so much.
Of
Thank you guys for
course.
getting to the end of this with us. It doesn't cost extra to be kind.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Jordan, I'm going to give you the last word before we say goodbye.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and definitely, just take the words that were being said to heart, take it with, everything that you have. And as long as you're able to be comfortable with yourself, I say it again, being comfortable with yourself is everything. And with everything you do, do it with kindness, do it with encouragement, and being able to be free in that. So I just encourage you guys just to make a difference out on your own too. Also, you guys are awesome. Thank you again, and hopefully we'll be able to have these conversations again. And even let us know if you guys have some questions that we could even talk about, or try to dissect a little bit. That would be awesome too.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.